Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to be with you. As many of you join us from all around the country, it's just an honor to be with you each and every single day. We have got a lot going on in the United States of America and the world today. But there's a through line here from the Middle East and the Sudan to the United States and all points in between and around the world authoritarianism. And I've spoken to you many, many times about my experience in Los Angeles in 1992. I had the honor of being in Los Angeles during the LA riots. I'd come in from Japan, had a hard time getting in. I was singing with Roberta Flack for her at that time. And when we finally got into the United States, we saw we were able to get into Los Angeles to do the Arsenio Hall show. Because if you recall, he kept his show going during the riots when the whole country had shut down, and certainly Los Angeles, because he wanted to use his platform to tell the stories of the disenfranchised, rights of the language of the unheard. He wanted the unheard to be heard on his show. Well, what was interesting was I was riding around with my father because I dovetailed with him, and he was in Los Angeles trying to get the peace. He had a police escort and all of that. And we went to Stevie Wonder Station, which is on Crenshaw Boulevard in the heart of the Black community. And I saw something that brought tears to my eyes. I saw the military and tanks rolling down Crenshaw Boulevard because they had a curfew and you had to observe it. And I said, wow, has it come to this? Well, it's come to this and more. Not only have the military covered Washington, D.C., it's coming to a city near you, and it's coming to Chicago. Although the cities that he's chosen, they are blue cities, if you will, Democratic cities. It's a little bit more, it's a little deeper than party. But that having been said, that is what is happening. And he's going to, he said, quell crime, although crime is going down in all of these cities. You're seeing pretty drastic drops. So I wanted to talk about this with this magnificent panel today. Of course, I've got attorney Mark Fancher, a brilliant lawyer and civil libertarian with us, and a former alder from the great city of Chicago. And point of personal pride, he is the son of Mayor Eugene Sawyer, the man who, oh my goodness, it can make me cry. Harold Washington wanted him to be the mayor after him. He said, should I fall, you are the person that I want to run the city of Chicago. There were no, but he had the ward where you had the most registered people, not just in the city, but in the country, most organized ward, and he delivered to his people. And his son went on and carried that fine tradition, carried on. And I just thank you for being with us today, you and Ted, your poodle. But I'm going to start with the publisher and founder of the Tribe. It's a tremendous, tremendous, it's a news outlet here in Chicago, but I would encourage all of you to really support it, TRIIBE. Support them because they really, while they cover Chicago news, it is news that will resonate with you all over the country and all over the world because we're all dealing with the same issues. And bring to you none other than Morgan Elise Johnson. She could be with us for a few minutes, but I wanted you to open this up for us because you are a newswoman. And I'd like for you to tell me what it is that you see because we're watching Washington, D.C. The youth there say, hey, I feel less safe. We're looking at the arrests, they're brown and black people. And Washington is a very interesting town because every other person there has diplomatic immunity. So trust and believe there is crime there. And it's not just in black and brown neighborhoods. But this is coming to Chicago, and the president has been very deliberate and quite vocal about sending the troops to Chicago. And mind you, that's ICE, that's the FBI, that's the National Guard, and federalizing the police force. And we've already had fraught relations with the police. What do you make of this?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Santita. It is an honor to be on this panel. The tribe, we have been working diligently and doing a lot of research, trying to understand this moment. So I'm so glad that you opened up talking about Rodney King, because in our research, that was the last time that the Insurrection Act was used. So the primary way that the president can deploy troops is through the Insurrection Act. And that's primarily to quell some sort of rebellion. So we can think about the Rodney King riots as the last time that this was deployed. We can also think about how President Trump has seemingly been strategically trying to incite a public reaction to give him a reason to do the Insurrection Act and to bring federal troops into our cities. And one of the ways that we believe that President Trump may be using his powers is to try to cause conflict and strife on federal grounds, because those grounds are under the authority of the president. So we saw that through actions with ICE, right? So we saw ICE going into the federal courts and dragging people out of the federal courts. And we saw that action getting a response of protesters and things like that. And then that further escalated things to bring more troops and guards around our federal buildings. So we're paying attention to the way that this administration kind of uses these I don't want to say loopholes. It is technically within the law, but we're trying to look closely at the law to say what can give this president the authority to escalate things. And we're getting that information out to our readers and community organizers to know, like, hey, if you're on federal grounds, that's a way that the federal government can escalate situations, because we know that crime is down in Chicago. And the mayor has done a great job in messaging that. So it's not really about crime. This is about power.
Well, he's done a great job in messaging that, and really he's been very deliberate in trying to set a tone and establish programs um, that would help to lessen crime. I went to Howard in Washington D.C. and I was there, thankfully. Attorney Mark Fancher and Alder Sawyer, you remember the time of the era of your father and Mayor Marion Barry. You had these bold black mayors. And one of the things that struck me about Mayor Barry was that he had something called the SYEP, the Summer Youth Employment Program. Anyone from 13 to 21, you remember that, Rod. 13 to 21, you had a job. Now you had to work. I remember the Youssef. I got one of those jobs, and he was a tour guide all over Washington D.C. showing you. But and my parents wanted us to work in the summer. If you weren't in school, you were going to be working. You needed to learn also the value of a dollar and the discipline of getting up and going someplace. As we wrestle with getting our children fed, when school is not in, that was something that you didn't have to worry about in Washington. You had the basketball courts open, the baseball fields open. And we've seen Mayor Johnson really try to, up against, some tremendous odds, to try and open things up. I mean, of course, he remembers his days as a Chicago public school teacher. And I think he's tried to be humane. And that's just me editorializing and observing, quite frankly. How do you think he is going to be able to handle this? Are we headed toward a showdown between Mayor Johnson and the president? And excuse me, and I cannot forget J.B. Pritzker, the governor, who is, of course, ambitious, according to press reports, to run for president. And Rahm Emanuel, who's being rehabilitated. Don't know if that will work. Well, you can turn your head back up. That you see him on CNN. He's got the most prestigious. He has access to the most prestigious outlets, even though, in Chicago, of course, we understand why he's no longer mayor. Where is this going? I mean, just given your understanding of history, your reporting of it, as you do your research, Morgan Elise Johnson.
Well, absolutely. This is about, it's about power, and it's really about, I think, Trump and his administration trying to capture these moments on television as if this is some kind of reality TV show that they can show to their base and say, look, we're getting rid of the bad people. We're getting rid of the criminals. And, first the criminals were the migrants. And we saw some Black people really kind of applauding that because they have us pointing at other poor people instead of pointing at the fact that the country is spiraling. The economy's down, inflation is up. It's really, really hard to live and make it in Chicago. So they first with the migrant crisis, they had us pointing at the migrants as criminals. And I'm afraid that what Black people didn't see is that with this escalation of federal forces and militarism, that we would be next. A lot of people said, we're Black, we're citizens here, so we won't be affected by this. But they forgot that the way that they disappear Black people is by putting us in prisons and having us work for slave wages. So as much as this is a power struggle and a show of force and a way to for them to take these clips and use them in their campaign messaging, it's also going to affect real people. And it's a level of illegal, just lawlessness and unconstitutional force that really concerns me, because when we have federal agents who have ties to the Proud Boys, or we have federal agents who are tied to the Department of Homeland Security, these are not really forces that we're used to dealing with in the Black community. These are different sets of laws. So while we may know how to move through the criminal justice system, what happens if we are picked up by federal troops? Like, federal troops are not the police. So how do we even interact with those forces? We're really, really concerned about this escalation because we're not sure what our public response can really be and what that leads to.
Before you go, as consumers of the news, because really you're giving us even in that explanation, it's a global view. But as Reverend Jackson says, it's not a mansion down, but it's a manger up view, from the people up. What should we be looking for? What would you advise consumers of the news to be looking toward? How should they analyze what the information that's coming our way?
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot that we're missing specifically from TV news. So I would be telling people to diversify their news sources. For Chicagoans specifically, we need to be looking at local news sources in DC, local news sources in Los Angeles, to see what people on the ground are experiencing. We're not talking about the feds coming through and stopping crime. They're setting up military checkpoints and harassing people. They're going up to people's front porches and harassing them. So this has a real potential to disrupt our daily lives, and we have to just be prepared with what our response is going to be. We also need to look at what community organizers are doing on the ground, because since the Marines were brought into LA, which is like crazy to say that the Marines were brought to LA, but people have been resisting day in and day out. There have been protests day in and day out in LA that just do not get any coverage on CNN. So you do have to tap into some local sources to see what resistance looks like, especially what joyful resistance looks like. Because again, I do believe that this federal government is looking to incite violence so that they have a reason to call for the Insurrection Act. And from there, we don't know where things could go.
Morgan Elise Johnson, of course, from the tribe. How can we access the tribe?
I encourage everyone to become a member of the tribe to support the work that we do. We are a digital publication with a mission to reshape the narrative of Black Chicago in pursuit of truth and liberation. You can go to our website at thetribe.com, and that's TRIIBE.com. And you can sign up for our membership there. You can join our newsletter. And of course, you can follow us on social media, on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. We're everywhere.
Everywhere. And they are my source of news here in Chicago. You and the Crusader. Look, I have to do it, and in these times, there are a few places I go, but I really want to hear what you've got to say. I don't have the Defender anymore, but I do have the Crusader and I do have the Tribe. Sending you so much love, Morgan and Lisa Johnson. Everybody support the Tribe as they support giving you an accurate view of our world. Thank you so much for being with us, Morgan Elise Johnson.
Thank you so much.
Alder Sawyer, help me to understand what we are looking at. Um, this plays differently in different communities. But Chicago's interesting, right? Um, Chicagoans march. Chicagoans demonstrate. We've got very alive um, political communities. I mean, I think that's one of the. If you can say if there's anything that one of the positive aspects of the democratic machine was that it got people involved.
Mhm.
Literally
You're absolutely right.
from
Absolutely.
door to door. You can say what you will, but
Mhm.
politics, everyone in Chicago had skin in the game. And that is something that we still live with. I mean, you had Richard Daley, you had the Black Panthers, you had Jesse Jackson, you had black folks who were working within the establishment, like your father, but they were sent by their neighborhood to go downtown to deliver to us because you got it all here. And then you've got a very alive, European immigrant community here. You got more Poles here than you have anywhere outside of Warsaw, Poland. And when the Ukrainian crisis hit, 38,000, no one talks about
Yeah.
that. Ukrainians
Nobody talks about that
ever. And no one talks
ever.
about because our governor is Ukrainian. Hello. So many of them are, but that's
Mhm.
untouched, right? I saw the finger. Well, tell me, but isn't that interesting that no one talks about that?
Absolutely. Hmm.
Well, this
And
right
we had
there.
a huge influx of Ukrainians during at the beginning of the unrest, and nobody talked about it at all.
What did you see when you saw that?
Well, you know what? It was somewhat orderly. They do have a neighborhood in Chicago, Ukrainian Village,
Hmm.
where most of Ukrainians actually settled in that general area, and they somehow worked it out. But it was a huge influx of Ukrainians coming in that would require services and social services and needs like anybody else, like the other populations that have been coming in from other areas of the world. We talked about those at length because, let's be honest, they were not white. But
Hmm.
but when the Ukrainians came in, they were welcomed with open arms and they were provided with resources, just like others that have been provided resources. But it was just not talked about. And I know that's what
Right.
we're not here to talk about that today, but that's a whole nother
Well, no, but that's part
whew,
of it because it's part of
conversation. Yeah.
that's part of the dynamism that you have in Chicago right now,
Yes.
and that is something that
Mhm.
Mayor Johnson has taken hits on
Mhm.
uh, because he had no control over that. They were
No.
just brought in and they were given the services that we say that's what they're getting. I'm like, no, they were given that. No, not only that, they were allowed to work because they were working at my
Yeah.
my hair salon. Okay.
Santita, you know what was frustrating about that when they first came, and when I left office, I became a business person. I do some lobbying, I do some legal work. I'm a lawyer by trade, but you know, I remember someone always telling me, "Out of chaos comes opportunity."
Mm.
And when the opportunity came, I started inquiring around the city about who's doing the crisis management, who's doing the work, who's providing food for these individuals, who's doing this. And it ended up no one could provide answers to me until I ultimately found out it was large mega corporations that were doing this.
Mhm.
No local companies, no black companies, heck, no Latino companies were
Mhm.
doing any work to provide for their own as they were going through these trials and tribulations of being dislocated from their homeland and coming up here, and even from Texas to coming up here. There was no one involved, and I always started talking about the practical edge of this. There were no people involved outside of white males that were making money off of stress, off of distress, off of the trials and tribulations of black and brown people. In this case, brown people. Um, there's no one that was profiting or earning a living. I would say, I don't want to say that it was taking advantage of, but there's opportunity there, and people should have been put to work. There was opportunities for Latinos, for blacks, for those that have been ultimately disenfranchised, and it wasn't there. Nothing happened. it was like crickets.
What do you make of the president promising to send the National Guard, and with the National Guard comes ICE, comes the FBI, comes a federalization of the police force.
Yeah.
And some of these people, some of these law enforcement officers have guns. You know,
Yes.
that's now being reported. Not all of them, but some of them. One is enough.
A couple of brief things, Santita. One, the president seems like he's, how to say this, he's in search of a solution in search of a problem. I think that's how you say it.
Mm-hmm.
He's trying to craft a solution and searching for a problem. Most of these large cities have no problem, no immediate threat right now. The numbers are coming down, things are regulating post-COVID, and things are on a positive swing. We have groups. Some groups are more active than others that have been in violence reduction, and the ones that are doing real work. They're doing a great job all over the country. So I just don't see the necessity. And we also have to understand, if these people do come, because the president doesn't believe, he states his own facts and he makes his own laws. So the Insurrection Act be damned. He's not going to really, he's going to use it because it's there, but he's going to twist it so it's going to benefit him for his uses, which are to disenfranchise Black people. I saw something on TV the other day. They had an individual from Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis, Tennessee has a similar crime situation, similarly situated as DC. But it's a red state. It's a red city. I don't see any troops going down to Memphis. I don't see any going to other red states that have issues, in Indianapolis and other red cities and red states where there are crime issues. I don't see one instance where he talks about troops being placed there. It's always the blue cities, blue states with Black representation. Let's just call it what it is. He's going after Black people. He doesn't think Black people are capable. You know, when he uses the word incompetent far too often when it's associated with Black people, he's equating that with incompetence, and that's horrible. We need to nip that in the bud and do something about that kind of conversation. He is going to bring the people here. If he stated it, I will say one thing about Donald Trump. If he says it with conviction, he's going to try to do it. I'm not saying it's going to be right, but he's going to try to do it. And he's going to make every effort to bring troops here to Chicago. And my real concern is the pushback.
Why do you have a pushback?
Chicago is known for a pushback. We're not going to take anything too kindly. So if they're going to come in Chicago, and this is going to be what he wants to cause confusion. He wants to cause the disarray and the chaos, if you will, so that he can continue to justify keeping troops here. But he's going to poke the bear. He's going to continue to push and poke until people push back. And when people push back, this is what he's going to say. See what I told you. This is what I told you. But it's a pushback out of frustration. It's a pushback out of lack of resources. If you want to really help us in Chicago, and you're worried about, and let's take out all the other issues, you're just worried about police action. Give us some more resources. Give us some more money to hire more detectives so we can clear more cases. Do things that will actually help our police department solve crimes and reduce the crime element in Chicago, in addition to allowing us to continue on with our other efforts, like you said, in employment, intervention, all the other things that are good, that are working now in Chicago and all over the country, by the way. Invest in those things as well. And with law enforcement, give us the tools necessary for us to do the job that needs to get done.
That is, you are former Alder Sawyer, but you always keep that that title because you have served Alder Rod Sawyer here in Chicago, and he's been at this for several generations. He's seen it from the top down and from the bottom up, and I think that, Mark Fancher, that's very, very important when you've been in the room and when you've heard these conversations about from the ward to City Hall, understanding how this works. So what do you make of where we are? I mean, because I'm also trying to figure out, and offline, Alder Sawyer and I talked about this, and he and I have known each other all of our lives. So let me just establish that. So we go all the way back. Yeah, that's right. He's on mute, but we go all the way back to childhood and before. And I'm wondering about the police, Attorney Fancher, because ICE, FBI, National Guard, do you lose your Miranda rights? You see, I'm talking to two lawyers here, and I'm a layperson. And is Miranda important now? Or, I mean, explain what Miranda is.
Well, Miranda are, everybody's watched cop shows where whenever someone's arrested, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can. Those are warnings that are given to anybody who's placed under arrest. And the question um, is that something that carries forward into the duties of these military troops who are patrolling the streets? And it does, but how that's implemented is the big question. And I think the point that many people have made is that these are military personnel. They're not trained to do law enforcement, and so why are you putting these people on the streets to try and do something that they've never been trained to do? They've been trained to go into war-torn areas, whether it's domestically or overseas, and to take control by force. Uh, they're not trained to go and to deal with the little girl whose cat is caught up in the tree, or to transport someone for their for psychiatric care or assistance when they're having a mental health crisis, or to mediate disputes between feuding neighbors, or to help someone who is experiencing a drug overdose. I mean, these are the kinds of things, and even police are not trained to do many of those things, which compounds the problem when you're talking about sending soldiers into these communities. But the thing is that this is one of those occasions when I think that Black people are only part of what's behind Trump's decision making. From the outset, he had made it pretty clear that what he wanted to do was to go after the Black Lives Matter protesters. He wanted to impose martial law and to crack down on Black Lives Matter protesters. That was part of his campaign spiel. That was one of the promises that he made. And when he took office, he didn't have any Black Lives Matter protests to go and deal with. And so I think that he tried to create some by insulting us, by taking Black history out of the Pentagon, by threatening to close down the African American Museum, by in many different ways just insulting Black people in the worst ways that he could possibly think of to insult them, thinking that what we would do is that we would flood into the streets outraged and upset, and he would have the opportunity to call out the troops, to crack some heads and to lock people down. None of that played out exactly as he expected that it would, because I think our people are just smarter than he is. Iraq is smarter than he is, but we certainly knew that that's what he was planning to do. And so the word went out that, don't go into the streets, don't take the bait, don't respond. Even when they had the No Kings rallies, the word went out on the streets, well, white people want to go out there, let them go, but we're not going. Everybody stayed home. And so he has found to his surprise that not only did Black people not take the bait, but now he's feeling a real threat from the white community, that everywhere he and his cabinet members and people in his inner circle go in public, they're met by people who are taunting and heckling them. They're screaming at them. You saw the thousands and thousands of people who went out in the streets for the No Kings rally. You have all of these town halls where Republican Congress people are being met with quite vigorous and militant opposition, disruption. And I think he's honestly afraid, especially as his poll numbers are continuing to sink. and he's going from one disaster after another. And he's got the Epstein issue that's got his base really upset and confused. That now he perceives the need to really go full martial law. He really needs to lock down the country. And I think that he is trying to do that piecemeal. He knows that the low-hanging fruit is to lock down the District of Columbia, Washington. He can do that. And so once he does that, the added benefit to that is Washington is still perceived as a black city, and and nobody really comes to the defense of black communities ever. And so he's not going to have a whole lot of resistance to doing that. If he tries to go to Chicago, that too is perceived as a black city, and he's not going to get a lot of resistance to doing it. But his ultimate goal is not just to lock down black cities. He wants to lock down the entire country because he's afraid of the entire country. And the more that he can normalize the militarization of US cities, the easier it will be for him to eventually place these troops in Peoria or in Nebraska or in other places where you would think that he never would experience a threat, because he, as dumb as he is, he also is not too dumb to see what they did on January 6th. And if you put January 6th on steroids, and he is fueling that fire with everything that he does in order to make life unbearable for average, working class white people, the more likely it is that they will become smarter, that they will become more focused, and they will identify him as the source of the problem, and they will not be stopped. And so he's trying to get ready. He's trying to make sure that the troops are in the streets and people dare not come after him, or he will crush them.
Well, we already have it in the air. Alder Sawyer, Attorney Fancher. I'm about to bring up Attorney Lewis Raymond, who's also a professor, because one need only look at these town hall meetings for the Congress people, and you see the anger that is out there, and this $1 trillion cut to health benefits in the United States will hit in November 2026. They haven't hit yet. So all of the pain, economic pain that most people are feeling now, it's nothing compared to what we're going to get going forward. And I'm wondering, as I bring up Professor Raymond, what you make of that, Alder Sawyer. I mean, because where are these resources? I mean, I'm trying to find out what people are supposed to do. The Yale study says that 50,000 people a year are going to die. And because of these cuts, people are already going to the store spending $100. And they have not even bought a slice of bologna. I mean, it's like the vice is closing. It's getting tighter and tighter on people. And I feel like, it just takes one spark and everything can blow. And it feels like they do want martial law. Alder Sawyer.
Well, just like Counselor was just stating, this, like you said, this squeeze is real. I'm the person that does the shopping in my house. So I'm the one that goes to the grocery store, and I enjoy it. It's actually was a relaxation for me. And I'm spending almost $500 at the grocery store, where I once spent maybe on a high end like that, I was spending $150. Not too many years ago. I'm just talking about a few years gone by. Mm-hmm. Things are real, and God bless it. I'm able to struggle along. It's because it's rough, but I'm able to struggle along and make sure that we're continuing to eat in our family here. But most people cannot do that. It's difficult with the prices the way they are. And like it was being stated previously, he's making the squeeze. He's putting the squeeze on all areas that he can. And the financial squeeze is always the most effective squeeze. That can take care of everything that you need to take care of. That financial squeeze will make it happen. So, I'm at a loss. I'm wondering what we can do about that part, because that's the part that he wields a little bit more influence than one that he should, because Like was stated previously, he's not the sharpest knife in the drawer. So it's something that he does, and it causes chaos. Again, I can't use that word enough. Just look at the stock market: up, down, up, down. It's sporadic, and there's no end in sight. He's only been in office 6 months. This is 6 months in out of a 4-year hitch. This is 6 months, and things are looking a little crazy. And I'll tag on to Lewis, my good friend Lewis Raymond, who I happen to see here today. Love you, my brother.
Love you too, my brother.
And you're also a veteran, right, Lewis?
Yes.
Yeah.
So you can help me to understand this. And to the point that the alder was just making, and that Attorney Fancher made before you, this occupation, if you will, is very expensive. That's my characterization of it.
Yes.
It has been established that in Washington alone, it costs 4 times as much to occupy as it would to house every unhoused person in DC. Everyone could be housed. So it's clear that is not what they are trying to do. And it's so interesting. If you keep people uneducated and hungry and frightened, they're compliant, and you manage them. But if you keep them educated and fed and prosperous, you have to govern them.
Got to govern them.
So,
and that's the biggest thing they don't want to do. And I talk a lot about that. Talked about that with my students. I've talked about it on panels. We're in a situation where the Republican Party has, let me just speak with them in Congress, have done such a good job of saying what we should be doing and making somebody else the bad guy and the boogeyman and everything else, that they're not governing. And if they didn't have this tool, even Donald Trump is using this as a tool so that they can talk about everything else but govern. This isn't governing. And back to your point about how expensive it is from a military point of view, each one of these people are not military.
Mm-hmm.
So they're being taken away from their family, their home. And now they're being paid on military salary. So mind you, you're away from your home, you're away from your family, your regular job, you're hoping you can keep that when you get back. And so now that's a cost. So their salary is a cost. Their healthcare is a cost. Now we got to house them. Well, we don't have bunkers for them. They're getting put in hotels and things of that nature. And even if we do create a shanty town for them, that's going to cost and bring more. That would actually cost more because you got to bring troops in to take care of that. And to go to your point of occupation, that's exactly what it is. Because from a military point of view, and I just had this conversation on the panel a couple of days ago, our rule of engagements is totally different. We're not trained to, we're trained to suppress. Literally, we're trained to suppress a threat, not to work with a threat, not to negotiate with a threat, which is all the things that happens with the police force. And our rule of engagements is not, and I'm gonna go one step further. We're not trained to disarm. We're trained to eliminate. So you just think about those different vernaculars and the rule of engagement in a civilized society. It's just it's a bomb waiting to happen. Because if somebody acts out, then the rule of engagement for someone who's a military individual is totally different than the police force.
And so this is purposeful to where you're thinking.
Say it again.
This is purposeful.
Oh, it's very purposeful. It's very purposeful. And I'm fearful on the far end of the spectrum, according to what Attorney Fancher just said. People got to look at history. This is what happened in Germany. Mm-hmm. Hitler was in jail. He came out, and slowly, remember, he was elected. Mm-hmm. Then he crowned himself. We can even go recent. Russia once, in the 90s was Yeltsin, it became a democracy. Then Putin was elected. Then they changed the constitution. so that he can stay forever. China, again, the same thing. So many times democracies have ended with applause.
Well,
Right.
what's interesting is that, this whole concept of how we are to be governed has been evolving. Because it was George Washington who made the decision not to be a king. And
Exactly.
the only independent president that we have had, the only president who has disavowed a party, the only president who was not a member of a party was Washington,
Yes.
because he felt that this being a member of a party was dangerous for a president. And you have Eisenhower who said, wait a minute, this military industrial complex will impact us in a material and spiritual way. So, I mean, and we don't have to go back to Nazi Germany. Just look at the United States.
Oh,
Because we have had J. Edgar Hoover. We had to live under the terror of that. Hey, ask Dr. King and everybody else,
right.
including us. We got files. It's something that we have to. I think that as we, when we take it overseas, we say, well, now it's happening here. It has been happening here, and the thing is, we have to stop it. But as you give us these metrics of engagement, I think Alder Sawyer and Attorney Fancher, that is what's unsettling, because when you bring in the military, elimination is the goal, suppression is the goal. So what do you make of this when Americans are going to be brought into their own hometowns and their cities, into their neighborhoods? I mean, what happened to posse comitatus? Can someone explain that?
And those are the things that, I mean, you have 3 attorneys on here, and I know each one of us are looking at that. The laws as they're stated, this should not even be a conversation.
Okay.
But in order for us, we have 3 co-branches of government, and one branch of government is absent. And the other branch of government can't even be active unless something actually happens. So, I mean, until Congress acts, I mean, he is king, and he's acting as such. There's no way in the world. So I'm gonna give you an example, and forgive me if I kind of get quiet on certain aspects of it. So I was actually an intelligence officer, and we would do exercises practicing collecting data. Okay, if we accidentally collected a U.S. citizen, we had protocols to assure that data was eliminated, because the military cannot practice on U.S. soil. That's one of the reasons he's bringing in the National Guards. He did the whole front with the Marines. He is putting his foot on the line to get us normalized, so we can feel okay, it can happen, but it can't. I mean, seriously, Google, when they wanted to start having satellites over the United States to give us the satellite pictures we have, that was an act of Congress, because we're not supposed to use military assets in the United States. So it shouldn't happen. But I mean, I'm very cautious now when I tell people what should not happen according to the law, because they are blatantly ignoring the law. There's a saying in grad school, Professor, I can't remember if it was a Hobbes, or I think it was Hobbes, an old political theorist, that always says to have more security, you have to limit your liberty. To have greater liberty, you have less security.
Mm-hmm.
And in the cry for security, as we saw in 9/11, after 9/11, there was a lot of liberty that was taken because we felt the need to be secure.
Well, and wait a minute, and we also gave it away.
We gave it away.
Right.
Yep.
So we gave it away. And I think, Attorney Fancher, that's what's dangerous. That, we've been frightened. Fearful people make bad decisions. And frightened, just fearful people, hungry people, desperate people. When you reduce people, which is what's happening to folks, we're watching a very slow coup. You see it in
Yes.
the airport. Now we're accustomed to taking off your shoes, frisk me. We have been slow walked into this.
Yeah,
Santita.
and this is
I'm sorry, go, Attorney
Yes.
Fancher.
yeah,
No, I'm
yeah,
sorry.
this,
Go ahead, Attorney Fancher.
oh, sorry. Yeah, this is a time when fear has no place if we want to survive. It's not only that we can't afford to be afraid, it's a time for incredible courage because we're faced with a very radical kind of a situation here that requires a very radical response. And when I say that, I don't mean that in the sense that most people think of it. A lot of people impulsively think, well, if the troops come in here, then we've got to hit the streets and we've got to do this and we've got to do that. But that plays right into the hands of Donald Trump. He wants that type of a reaction in the streets so that he can say that there's an insurrection, that there's a riot. He has a basis for continuing to do this. What I think is most effective in situations like this is to continue what Black people have been doing almost instinctively, which is to say we're just not in this. We're not taking the bait. And not only that, I think that there has to be some very quiet education going on among people on the grassroots level about the kinds of things that we're talking about today, the implications of it. And here's what's really going to require a lot of courage. And that is for everyday people in these communities, we're talking about National Guard troops, people who still maintain a connection, an ongoing connection with the communities that they come from. Everyday people talking to these soldiers and really helping them to understand the way in which they're being used to the extent that they don't already see it. And I think that there also needs to be a serious exploration of what their responsibilities are under the law, because they do have an obligation not to comply with orders that are unlawful. And to the extent that they're being asked to do things that arguably are illegal, it would require incredible courage. But I think it's incredibly necessary during this time for people just not to cooperate, and that includes the soldiers. That we, as a society, as a community, as a country, decide that this man has hijacked the highest ideals of what many people in this country aspire to, and has used the machinery of government to subvert it and to try and bring it down. And that it becomes necessary for us collectively to all say that we're not going along with that program. And that's going to require a greater degree of sacrifice by some than by others, but I think everybody needs to be willing to stand up in this moment and to do what's necessary if there's any hope for the generations that follow.
Alder Sawyer, why did that resonate with you?
It did, and Attorney Fancher hit it right on the head. And what I wanted to say is that during Trump's first term, I had a series of meetings with my community, and I used to ask him this question: what are you willing to give up for more safety? It's a very pointed question, and I was concerned because a lot of, particularly my senior population, was saying, bring in, and it was a conversation back then, bring in the National Guard, do this. And they were like, bring them on. I don't have nothing to fear for. I said, but that's not the issue. I understand you have nothing to worry about. You'll accept a frisk and all that in the interest of safety, but that's not our problem. But Attorney Fancher, he hit it right on the head. We have to be able to push back on unlawful orders and things that are contrary to the public good. But sometimes it feels like it's just easier to comply and submit and go on about your business because you may have this false sense of security because you have all these people out here on your block, on your street, in front of you, and you think that you're safer. You're being controlled. You're not being safer. You're being controlled. You're being manipulated. And I wanted people to understand that. And I used to have a series of meetings. I would ask that question at the beginning of a meeting. because people would talk about more police, more this, more National Guard, troops, everything, more drones, all that. And I'm saying I want us to be safe. I want us all to make sure that we're comfortable in our environments and we can feel safe. But there's got to be a tipping point. Sometimes in order for your additional safety, you're going to have to give up some liberty. And that's where I have the concern.
Because it seems that once you give up a right, very, very difficult to get it back.
That's absolutely right.
Exactly.
I've got about 5 minutes left here. What do you want us to know? I mean, I come from the civil rights movement, and particularly the King Wing, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, that Dr. King wrote a book, The Strength to Love. People think that nonviolence is a display of weakness. It actually is a display of strength. These people would sit and take the blows, and they would take the physical blows, and they would really will themselves into loving the people who mistreated them. And they never stopped pushing. But they also, that was also, my father explained to me and my mother, it was a tactic, because if you say you can't, they have more guns than you.
Mm-hmm.
That fight you are not going to win. But the moral fight you can win. You might lose some people, but you're not going to lose everybody. Nonviolence really does work. And I'm wondering, I believe that we're going to have to train people in that, like not taking the bait, because that's really part of that. That has stayed with us. Like, wait a minute, I know that I am being tricked here. So I'm going to go around the group and get closing thoughts from everyone, because I think we're going to have these conversations over. Alder Sawyer, Attorney Raymond, Attorney Fancher. We're going to have these conversations over and over and over again, because I think they're going to continue to tighten the vice, if you will. Because these people really, they look at these town hall meetings and they know they've got a problem out here.
Yes.
White people are angry.
And
They can't send their kids to school, starting with you, Professor Raymond.
And I was going to say that's the biggest takeaway that I would ask people to do is don't fall for the bait, because you're right. What's really happening is their policies are causing problems. You have the Epstein files. If you look at the Republican town hall meeting, those people are mad. Mm-hmm. So what did he do? They've been saying, like we've been saying, essentially black cities. Black cities are criminals and there's crime, and I'm going to send people there. You notice that they're not going to, St. Louis is the most murderous city. Mm-hmm. They're not going there. Memphis. Now, those are Republican governors that are actually asking for them, and they're not coming. But Chicago is a fight, and he wants that fight. And as long as there's that fight, then we're not paying attention to everything else. And he looks as though he's looking tough. So let's not fall for the bait.
Attorney Mark Fancher.
Yeah, yesterday in our church, the biblical text was the first chapter of Jeremiah, where Jeremiah is basically being charged by God to be a prophet, and he's responding and saying, look, I'm like 18 years old. I'm too young to do this, and the people that you want me to prophesy against are the kings and the religious leaders and everybody else who's got lots of power. I mean, how are you asking me to do this? And God's response is, look, I will rescue and protect you. You just do what I say. I got your back. Mm-hmm. And he's got our back. We have nothing to be afraid of. I mean, and to prove that we have nothing to be afraid of, look at who Donald Trump is afraid of. He's afraid of God because in recent weeks, what he's been saying is that he's afraid that he's not going to make it into heaven. And that's what's driving him right now to try and resolve the war in Ukraine. He thinks he's going to be able to reduce this to a transaction and negotiate his way into heaven. If Trump is scared of God, then we should take a cue from that and know that if God's on our side, we got nothing to be afraid of.
Alder Rod Sawyer.
I don't know if I can even come after that one. Wow. Attorney Fancher hit it right on the head, but I'll just say this. I think that it's time for us to educate and inform people, continuing to educate and inform people about their rights as citizens. I mean, I hate to sound, overly simplistic, but, there was a lot to be said about learning about, your basic government functions when you were in 7th and 8th grade.
Oh,
Yes.
It was important. I still remember those things that I learned when I was 12, 13 years old about functions of government and your place in them.
Mhm.
And I had the benefit of living with an elected at that time, learning it firsthand, if you will. But I think we all need, to get back to our civics basics and understand what we can do as individual citizens to stand up against the tyranny that's going on right now. And again, we're 6 months into a 4-year term. We need to make sure that we're continuing to stand up for this next 3.5 years and have our voices be heard and our resistance known to illegal and immoral acts that are being placed upon us. God is with us, like Attorney Fancher said, and we should not be fearful of anything that goes on, as long as we have God behind us. And we need to keep on pushing and making sure people understand their rights. I used to tell people, and I still maintain this: I die for my rights. I will gladly die for my rights. I don't want to die for my rights, but I will. No one wants to die, but we all will do that if it's necessary, and it would mean the improvement of our people, particularly. And I just say it, Black people in particular, but all people generally. I want to make sure that we're all safe and free, and we have the ability to pursue our dreams and not be subjected to this dictatorial situation that we're having right now.
Chicago Alder, former Alder, Rod Sawyer. So glad that you have been with us. You know it's not going to be the last time.
Absolutely.
Professor Raymond is not going to be the last time. And of course, Attorney Mark Rancher is with us all the time. But we've got to come back because I think that we need to continue to have these conversations here. Hope you all will come to Rainbow Push because we have got to talk to our people and help them to understand how they are going to have to conduct themselves. Most of the people who have been arrested in Washington, D.C., as of this moment, are Black and brown. And they are also scared. They're saying that. And we've got to do something about this. You've got 900,000 Black and brown people who are unregistered to vote in Texas as they are fighting to be heard. Think about that, everybody. You have the power. The power is with the people. It really, really, really is. So think about that. Not only think about it, do something about it. I've got Colleen Rowley coming up in just 1 minute. Colleen Rowley, of course, FBI whistleblower. She told us that 9/11 didn't have to happen. She was one of Time's 2002, in 2002, the Persons of the Year. We're going to talk about this. And why did the FBI raid Mr. Bolton? I want to know. We can speculate. If y'all want to speculate, just stay tuned for more of the Santita Jackson Show, everybody. Click over to the next hour. Sending you all so much love. The Santita Jackson Show, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota.